In this episode, I have a conversation with myself. We take a look at a little steam action and railfan on the GN in 1970.
Thing to focus on are the blocks.
We dive into signaling, as well as take a look at a series of Sanborn maps that I stitched together of the city of Minneapolis. And Colin Bohannon answers a viewer's question of the week. And we cover all this on this episode of the GN in 1970.
70s.
All right, well, here we are today with none other than future me, and we'll see what we have to say in regards to what's actually happening in the future, looking at the brass cabooses that we talked about painting, the passenger car that was talked about painting, and any other project. I mean, signaling was even mentioned, and I guess I'd like to know where that's at. Do you want to explain yourself? Nah, I can't really explain myself. You're the one not doing the stuff. I'm just the one that dreams it up, remember? It's two different people, but same mind. I don't know how that quite works, but I guess that's my explanation. Well, it's quite clear that the future me talks just as much as present me, and I guess that's the reason why some of the stuff hasn't gotten done. Where's the signaling at? On the railroad. That's where it's at right now. We've been working on it. It has a lot of logistical information that needs to kind of get tied together, and it's a slow process by a couple of slow modelers. So I guess that would probably answer the question the best I can. As far as the signaling is concerned anyhow. I mean, there's other stuff we can cover, but I don't know how much time we got. All right, well, that's where signaling is at. That's a lot longer reason than we needed. But, well, yeah, I get it. You got a lot of things to say. And what we're actually looking for, I guess, in the future episodes here, just as we wrap up the GN in 1970, is probably just finishing up those cabooses, finish up the passenger car, and obviously we'll touch on the signaling, which we'll actually take a look at in this episode. Yeah, so
Hope so.
Hopefully you enjoy talking to future me.
Yep.
And maybe we'll talk to him in the future. I don't know. Or the future will talk to us.
Or you stop talking.
All right, the future doesn't look so good. Enjoy the rest of this episode. Yes, enjoy. If anybody ever asks who built Minneapolis, I think it's safe to say that the railroads did. What we're looking at here is a series of Sanborn maps that I stitched together. The date on these maps were 1952. Coming up from the lower right was the Milwaukee Road from their Southtown yard. And speaking of yards, we're looking at the Minneapolis and Western Railway yard, as well as the M and St. L yard that were sandwiched in just along the river. If we slide into the left, infamously, in the lower left-hand corner is the Milwaukee Road Depot. You can see the tracks that came up from Southtown Yard into the Milwaukee Road Depot, and you ask yourself, where's the GN? Well, the GN is right up the river. As most of you know, the GN Union Depot is located here, and it's pretty obvious to see why. All these railroads collided together in this area. It's pretty cool to kind of take an overview of Minneapolis itself and kind of look back on history. Four railroads shared a very intertwined history due to the efforts of James J. Hill, the railroad tycoon who had founded the Great Northern Railway. Hill purchased an interest in the Northern Pacific in 1896 as the railroad endured a period of financial turmoil. Hill made an attempt to merge the two railroads, but wouldn't successfully be able to do so until what year? 1970. Do you know what day in 1970 the merger took place? Was it A, February 2nd, B, March 2nd, C, June 14th, D, July 11th? If you get this right and don't remember your anniversary,
Not my problem.
what's that you hear? A little steam? This is going to be a PRRS-2 steam turbine number 6200. Now, this is a Broadway Limited Imports model. It is referred to as a brass hybrid Paragon 3 sound system that a fellow modeler actually wants the sound removed. So before we mute it or mutilate it, we figured we'd give it a listen and run it across the GN in 1970s. So we're just going to do a little railfanning.
let's take a look at a derail in slow motion. Steam might not be our bag, they're definitely fun to run and check out, so hopefully you enjoyed this little excursion across the GN in 1970, and who knows, we might have other guests in the future.
Alright, I want to give you the most basic installation of signaling, just to give you a basic idea of how signaling works. I'm not going to dive into all the intricacies of how you program it and all that because we want to keep this as simple as possible.
Is that really possible?
To give you a basic understanding of what we have on the railroad, as you can see there, that was a Details West signal.
Yeah, I can read.
And inside here we have a couple of Digitrax signals set on each side of the main. There's one on this side and this side.
Oh, those are beauties.
We look like your mama.
And then again up here. Thing to focus on are the blocks. These 3 tracks, that's a block. This track is a block, and of course these upper tracks are a block. Focusing on that just at least tells you where the train is, occupancy. We have insulators. You see where it says gap? There are cut rails. Both rails are cut on each side, and then there's another one up here.
Cut.
We have it isolated so then the system can see just that block when a train is in it. Makes sense, right?
I guess.
The bottom is that way and the top is that way. Those are all isolated from the endpoints on each end. Each area signal is that there's going to be a cut or a gap. To go a little further, you say, well, how do you get occupancy? How can you identify it?
Oh boy.
You look at all the wires here and you think,
Holy spaghetti on an idle Tuesday, Batman.
Well, what goes where? Well, this wire here, if you follow it along.
We're not going to get into that far, but these wires are obviously all tethered to a block. Each pink wire goes to a block. Where do the blocks go from there? Well, we use terminal buses. Colin did a nice job when we did the DC system, and all of these terminal buses head out to the particular tracks that are out there. He has them all labeled. You can see the labeling down in between. We know exactly where stuff is. We can tap right into it. So these lines that are tapped into here feed into, this is a BDL168.
What?
Occupancy. Digitrax BDL168. That tells us where a train is when it's on one of these tracks. Makes sense? You follow.
Barely.
This one is what talks to the signals. The signals have the ribbon wire. You can run multiple signals on it. As you see, the ribbon wire runs up and eventually gets to these 2 signal heads. That information that is being told to the computer that there's occupancy going through the BDL168. There's a train on, let's say there's a train on this track.
Okay.
It's going to tell this system, which is going to relay that into JMRI or CATS. And we'll look at that in just a moment.
Cats?
The signals, they're just wired up and they're basically traffic lights that you're going to let the system tell what to show as far as indication is concerned.
Got it.
Following on the installation, it's fairly simple. It's basically occupancy,
Pink noodles.
and signaling.
Rainbow wire.
You're done there. We're done with wiring.
Finally.
So you got this all up and running. You have your signal heads lined up. I'm not going to dive into the intricacies of how you get each one doing each thing because that is above and beyond what we want to look at here. This is the basics of signaling.
Let's take a look at the laptop and see how all that stuff functions.
Tangent.
This is my dad's stir stick collection along with a few GN buttons.
Kind of cool.
Did you spring out of your seat when you knew the answer to when the BN merger took place? Popping up yelling, B, it's B! B, March 2nd is correct. The CB&Q Northern Pacific, Great Northern, Spokane, Portland, Seattle Railways became part of the BN Inc. in 1970 as of March 2nd. If you guessed February 2nd, the United States versus Interstate Commerce Commission actually was decided on February 2nd, 1970, so kind of close.
Okay, I mentioned in there that we're running JMRI. That's here. This is CATS. CATS runs the panel. You have a design program here, so it's CATS Designer. You can set up your schematic, and obviously you can see we're in the process of setting it up. But this is the basics. You're looking at just having a line, and in this case we have a train sitting in Delano, we'll look at here in a moment. But that's showing occupancy. BDL 168 says that block has a train. It's red.
Makes sense.
Signals. This is CTC controlled, so the dispatcher can come in here and they can turn on or off a route. And in this case, I've already routed a train that's going to head westbound. What do you need to be able to show the occupancy? Since we know we already have the signaling system in place, you need a locomotive. That's what's going to trip the detector. When a locomotive is on the tracks, that's tripping the detection. We're going to turn this train on, but before we do, we want to know what else can trip detection. Resistance.
I don't want to do it.
First and foremost, when you look at a caboose, in this case, we have a caboose here,
Focus it in.
and the caboose has resistors on the wheels. You see one there? You see one there. These are 1,000 ohm resistors tethered between the axle and the side of the wheel using liquid solder. So that creates the resistance, and that at least protects the rear of our train with our caboose. We're going to run this train up the hill, and we're going to show you the occupancy in action. We've arrived up here in East Delano, and I'm just showing you the signals as they knock down. We're going to pull this train forward as we go through. It's entering into the control point. And from a signaling perspective, a wiring, the control point, the locomotive is in the control point that's between the signals. You basically want to block anywhere in between signals. If it's the block going this way, the block going this way, or your control point. You want to be able to isolate those so the thing's able to know your detection. I'm going to stop there just for a second so you can see the occupancy on the panel. And you can see we're coming or on the main, and we're pulling ourselves through onto Litchfield, Maine, heading west. So as we continue on here. All right, here we are at West Litch. We've just arrived, and again, we're looking at another control point. There's a switch here. That switch is isolated, and you have a control point between the signals here. So we're going to move ourselves forward, and we'll trip this one, and we're going to close out the signaling segment with a nice little run-by.
You done shoot about as good as you model.
This week's Cullen's question was based on signaling. Somebody asked, which is better, ABS or CTC? My honest answer is whichever one you can actually read. And I don't think you're all that bright, so I'd say neither. But if you can get one installed and you can get it working, well, that's half the battle. I would actually go for the CTC, but ABS is much like traffic lights, and that might be easier for your operators. That's it for Cullen's questions.
Hopefully you enjoyed this most recent episode of the GN in 1970, and even if you didn't, you can pop over to the channel and take a look and see if there's a video there you might like. There's the GN in 1970, the virtual tour of the GN in 1970, as well as Sue the Milwaukee Road. I want to give a huge thanks to those that have hit the like button, hit subscribe, as well as commented on various videos. It means a lot to me because we've actually connected as modelers and be able to learn different tips from one another, as well as learn about other channels and guys that are sharing content. I don't make these videos for me, I make these videos for you, so hopefully you're enjoying them and you enjoy the future episodes of the GN in 1970.
70s.